It's been a couple of days since the Euro 2024 final defeat, and the dust has now settled, and it looks like Gareth Southgate's era as England manager is coming to an end. How do we judge it? How do we rank it? Gareth Southgate has turned English football on its head, in my opinion, and deserves to go out with his head held high. He was desperate for that trophy, absolutely desperate. Does that desperation continue to make him want to stay in charge for the 2026 World Cup, or is it time for fresh faces and a fresh voice leading this group of incredibly talented players that just can't seem to get over the line? Make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. This is going to be a bit of an open conversation about the game on Sunday and where that leaves Gareth Southgate. It was a very disappointing night. It really was. And I don't think many England fans expected us to be in the final after the way that we played throughout the tournament. It was a bit of a shock. Sometimes you need that luck on the way, and England were definitely a moments team the way we got there. You know, Bellingham's overhead kick, Saka kind of exercising those demons. We had brilliant moments, which those fans who were out in Berlin and those even though weren't there, were watching at home, will never ever forget. And that's what Gareth Southgate has delivered on plenty of occasions as England manager, but he just hasn't quite been able to deliver that trophy. But he's got closer than anyone before him has, and he deserves to be respected for that. But now, is it the right time for a fresh face and a fresh voice in that camp? And what does that look like? Personally, I think it's the right time to try something new. I've been a big Southgate sympathiser. I've been a big fan of him throughout his reign. Like I said, the kind of moments and memories that he has delivered me and many England fans should not be forgotten, even though it hasn't ultimately led to that piece of silverware that we all so desperately crave in. What are we now? 60-odd years of hurt since 1966. And we've got the closest that we ever have. 2 back-to-back Euros finals, a World Cup semi, and a World Cup quarter in which we were the better team. We were the better team against France. It really, it hurt on Sunday because I think it all became apparent quite quickly that this era is coming to an end. And I think for many people, that'll be a relief. I think a lot of people want this era to come to an end. I know there's not a lot of people out there who are a massive fan of Gareth Southgate. And I understand that. But you can't knock what he has done, and he deserves to go out with his head very much held high. If you're looking at the options that could potentially come in for England, what does that do? What does that look like? Eddie Howe, Jurgen Klopp, Mauricio Pochettino, Lee Carsley, do they promote from within again and go down that route? Spain have gone down that route and it's worked for them. England went down that route with Southgate in the first place and it's delivered us, those nearly moments. So do England roll the dice on someone like Lee Carsley again? I wouldn't mind that. I look through these options and I think there's only a few out of the realistic options that make me think we should twist and go for something different. Eddie Howe for me is the one that jumps out. Eddie Howe said in an interview, I think a few years ago, that you can't turn down the England job. And no matter how well things are going with Newcastle right now, their trajectory with the ownership and all those kind of things, he could deliver success there 100%. I think he's a good enough manager to do that, especially with the investment behind him. But I do think he could be lured away, and I think he would be my choice as England manager if England are to gamble. Thomas Tuchel, likely to kind of come in and play a back three. That's already suited England a lot. Very tactically flexible in game, very tactically astute. I think that's something that was lacking in the final against Spain. And has been a criticism of Southgate in the last 2 finals and throughout the last 4 tournaments, maybe. Especially in the last few, because our team has been good enough, to implement the tactics in the way that he wants to and get over the line, but we just haven't been able to do it. Jurgen Klopp. A lot of people are talking about Jurgen Klopp. I just can't see that. I can't see that at all. I do think, in my opinion, and not a lot of people would agree, that I think it's important that the England manager is English. I do think that is important. Not for any reason other than I think it helps form a sense of identity. And I think England is still craving that in a way. Like, you look at Spain and you look at Italy and you look at the way that they play, even though their teams might evolve. Like, this Spanish team isn't what Spain were in 2008 or 2010 or 2012 necessarily, but they've still got that form of identity. Italy have their footballing identity. Brazil have their footballing identity. But I think England are still scrambling for that a little bit. But I do think having an English manager does help with that in some way. It's hard to explain, but I just think that is the right thing to do, which I think for me makes Eddie Howe the best choice. As a Tottenham fan, I've seen it on many occasions playing Newcastle where Eddie Howe has changed in game and adapted things. And I remember when we played Newcastle last season, towards the end of it, they completely changed the way they press and they absolutely killed us and nullified absolutely everything. It was the best performance I'd seen against Tottenham that season. And they spanked us. They beat us 4-0, deservingly so. 4-3-3 it would be likely to be. Anthony Gordon, you'd imagine, will get his chance with England if it was to be Eddie Howe. I think it's frustrating the lack of minutes Anthony Gordon had in this tournament, especially against teams that had ageing right-backs a lot of the time. It felt like we were able to get at teams a lot, and we just weren't brave enough maybe to make that call. Don't get me wrong, I think there were games that necessarily didn't suit Gordon, and I think he made other changes that definitely worked, whether it was Eze coming on that left-hand side or someone else. But I do think Eddie Howe's England would represent an exciting future and potentially represent a winning future. I think there's this idea that you need to have this manager that's going to come in and win now and have that winning mentality. England tried that with Capello and that tactical approach, and someone who'd won, everywhere he'd been really. And that didn't work. As a Tottenham fan, again, you're kind of wearing those battle scars of like, well, we tried to do that. We tried to do that. We tried to bring in win now managers in Conte and Mourinho. And I think now Spurs have landed on a manager in Ange Postecoglou who's got a better winning mentality than all of those, because just some in terms of the fit for the club as well, sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think it's finding the right fit as much as anything. Eddie Howe, I think from a PR point of view as well, worked really well, very friendly with the media, very approachable. I think he would create a very fun environment for those England players to work in as well, an enjoyable one, which I think is very important. We've seen the importance of that with Gareth Southgate. And I think the idea of Eddie Howe's England would be very exciting to me. And I think, like, you look at someone like Pochettino as well. I wouldn't mind Poch as a fit for the England manager. Again, with the way he works with young players and there being this clear kind of desire to bring those players through. And maybe that is England's identity. Maybe that's what we do, but a lot of other countries do that as well. I guess it's more in the way that we play. I think Poch's football would represent or would fill a lot of the gaps that England fans are still wanting to see in terms of pressing, build-up play, all those kind of things. Just being that little bit braver. Again, I think back to that Tottenham side of 2016-17 and how brave we were under Poch. Kind of that swashbuckling way that we played football. And don't get me wrong, you get someone like that under Jurgen Klopp as well, but I just can't see that. I can't see that at all. And I do think out of all of these kind of choices that we've just sort of talked about, I think Eddie Howe is the right one. Otherwise, I know it sounds crazy, but I would be happy to roll the dice with another tournament of Gareth Southgate. I do think not winning that Euros has killed him a little bit. I think he would be devastated because I think he really thinks that he can get this group to win a trophy. I think he's desperate for that World Cup. And whether that desperation to take him to the World Cup means that he stays on for another tournament, even though we haven't won it, I just think that Euros defeat, would have been too much of a dagger. I think that hunger very much is still in him to win the World Cup. And let me know in the comments whether you think Southgate will still be the manager by the time the next tournament rolls around. But yeah, it's, I didn't do a video after the game on Sunday because it all kind of felt very raw and quite sad, really, and hard to pick the bones out of a little bit, because I actually thought our approach was pretty decent in the game and the right thing. I thought there were things that we did well. I think there were things that we did poorly, but sometimes it's okay to just say that you were beaten by the better team, and we were on the day. And I think it hurt a lot yesterday because it did feel like this kind of era that we've all loved so much of England is sort of coming to the end. But I think we are also ready collectively to take that next step. We've been craving that silverware since 1966. It's hard. It's really hard to kind of deal with and come to terms with. But, we will get there one day. We will get there. I think, again, with someone like Lee Carsley, if you were to look at someone like him, I believe he plays 4-4-2 quite a lot in the under-21 system. And it's like, have England really got those strikers coming through at youth level to make that step up? Because he's going to want to bring a lot of players with him. That's a question. Who is the striker for the World Cup in 2026? Regardless of who the manager is. There are so many questions to still be answered in this squad, let alone who the manager's going to be. The England squad, I think, largely is in a great place. But I think there's some fine-tuning and there's some answers there's some questions that need to be answered a little bit. And I don't really have them. And this has been a bit of a brain dump because I think a lot of England fans are feeling that way. I think it's quite hard to put across like clear and coherent thoughts about where we should go 2 days after we've lost another final. But we should also be proud of the fact that we got there and proud of the fact that so many players emerged themselves as candidates to be starters at that next World Cup and for tournaments beyond that as well, with Mark Gahey, Cole Palmer, the kind of two standouts really. in terms of their impact. Obviously, Palmer, not necessarily with his time on the pitch, but what he did with his time on the pitch was absolutely superb. Mark Gay played every single minute of every game other than the Swiss quarter-final because he was banned, and he was superb. That's the thing. Does he partner John Stones or is it Jared Branthwaite? You know, John Stones, I think, will be 32 by the time the next World Cup rolls around. So, yeah, cathartic analysis, I suppose, a little bit, I think, is needed. Do you have to take the emotion out of it with Southgate? I think the FA are going to want him to stay on regardless. That is quite clear. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I just wanted to come on and talk about it because I just feel like there's so much stuff swirling around in my brain, and you know, this hasn't been the most clear or coherent video I've ever put out, but it's just yeah, where do we go? Where do we go from here? Thank you so much for all the support over the Euros. The Euros is done. We're back to club football. There will be a video on Thursday morning looking at the Tottenham Hearts pre-season friendly, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. Thanks so much for the support. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, peace. Come on, England. One day, it'll come home. I'm sure it will come home.